Hey Shakers, welcome to Handshaking, where Matt Holmes interviews top entrepreneurs on one personal branding tip you can implement instantly. That means today. That means right now, right this very second. And if you need help with launching your personal brand, go to handbrander.com.
Welcome back to the Handshaking podcast, where we interview top entrepreneurs on one personal branding tip for you to take today, Shakers. Today, we're here with Andy Paul, and Andy is a sales evangelist, author, speaker, founder of Zero Time Selling, and a ton of other things that might make the title too long. Because anyway, Andy, could you tell us a little bit about your story?
Sure. So I've been around forever. Worked in tech sales for a long time, worked for a bunch of different venture-funded startups in senior management roles, started my own company in the year 2000, bringing the lessons that I learned as a successful VP of sales at entrepreneurial companies to other small businesses. And then in the year 2012, published my first book, so it got me on a new path as a thought leader, author, speaker. And then I started a podcast last year, my own podcast, called Accelerate. And it's doing really well. I've got a ton of listeners, and we go out actually now 6 days a week with new episodes, talking to 6 days a week. Sales leaders, world-class experts on sales, marketing, management, leadership, and so on. Anything to help somebody gain and understand what they can do to accelerate their own sales.
Wow, well, I have lots of questions, because being an author, hosting a podcast are amazing personal branding strategies. But to kind of bring it relatable to the first person starting out, Andy, how do you monetize these? Where do you make your income from with all these endeavors?
Well, it's sort of an expanding universe of things I'm trying to do. But initially, it's people inviting me to speak, come to companies, do workshops. I do half-day, full-day workshops. A lot of coaching of entrepreneurs, CEOs of startups, tech startups, also small, mid-sized businesses. What are the strategies they should be using to scale and grow their business? And so I work with a lot of CEOs on that. And then now, as we go later into 2016, rolling out some online products, digital products, subscription-based services that people can use to gain access to my content or to me personally.
Awesome. So you're making the bulk of your income from in-person kind of workshops, and you're trying to transition more from online? Is that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Very cool. So let's talk a little bit about personal branding. You told me that when you first published your book was kind of your big hurrah, right?
Well, yeah, it's like the calling card that consultants do, right?
Yeah.
And then it turned out that actually a much bigger audience that people liked it than I really anticipated. It became, much well received than any expectation that it would be. And that was a book called Zero Time Selling. And that sort of got me thinking, okay, maybe there's a different path to pursue now rather than just these individual consulting contracts like I've been doing before, but maybe there's a broader audience of people interested in what I had to say about sales and how they could grow their sales more rapidly.
Amazing. So some of the other guests I've interviewed today here at Podcast Movement didn't necessarily write an entire book for the first step of personal branding.
I did it backwards, yes, I admit that. So when I went out to publish my first book and I was looking for publishers, many people said to me, well, where's your blog? Where's your platform? I had no clue what they were talking about whatsoever. I was brand new to that. And I said, well, sue me. I've got the book first. And so what do you want me to do? And so, yeah, I did it backwards. Had I done it again, I would have started building my platform, and the recommendations I'd make to other people is, start blogging, start sharing content, something that tells something about yourself and what you stand for and what you believe in. And, don't jump right to the book. Instead, build the book out of the things that you write. And that's really what I did with my second book, which was really based on, I deliberately said, okay, when I set out to blog after publishing my first book, I said, well, what do I want to talk about in that second book? And I started sort of like a comedian, taking the material on the road and trying out things. Mm-hmm. That's what I did with my blogs, is tried out new ideas, things I had been thinking about, and got a gauge of what the reception was to it. And then that ultimately became the foundation for my next book.
Smart. Love it. So after you started taking personal branding seriously, could you tell me about some of the benefits you started to see?
Well, it's just greater recognition, right? I now go places and people recognize me, which is sort of surprising still to this day. I mean, I had I went someplace at a conference a couple months ago, and somebody recognized me just on my voice from my podcast.
Wow.
So, that immediately for me meant there was a connection that we're starting to form with people, just people, loyal listeners to the show, or people that benefit from what we were talking about. So, yeah, it's just the benefit has been just a growth of awareness, which leads to a growth of business. And I think for me personally, sets me up to take the steps that I want to do to grow my business in terms of more of the online business that I've been doing before.
Yeah. So where do you draw the line? Because I find myself in a very similar boat as you, Andy. Most of my money is made from a local business. But I want to start converting more sales online and helping a larger amount of people. Where do you draw the line between personal branding versus cash flow for your business? And how do you draw that line? How do I even ask this question?
I guess I don't talk about it. I think about it in terms of drawing a line. It's an evolution. And I think that the evolution really has to be motivated by having content to share. Right? You can't have an online business, you can't have products that you sell or even books you sell or so on if you don't have something unique, a unique point of view, a unique position, something that you're going to sell that people find value in. And so you have to continually be looking at how do I create content that sort of is going to feed into that. Mm-hmm. And then once you've developed that content, is how do you repurpose it into a shape and a form that people would find value in and be willing to pay you for it.
Yeah, interesting. So I've talked a lot on the first few episodes of this podcast about online content, right? Blog, podcast, video.
Right.
You take me as the best guest to ask, what should entrepreneurs be doing outside of the online world when it comes to personal branding?
Oh, well, that's a great question. What should we be doing in the physical world? Well, speaking certainly helps. And if you go out and I might do some of that, probably not maybe as much as I could, but I'd sort of prioritize more doing workshops for companies as opposed to doing public events. Mm-hmm. But I know some speakers that are quite good at going to public events, conferences, and so on, speaking there, where they don't necessarily get paid for speaking, but they're in front of an audience, and then they can upsell or cross-sell into their products that they sell online. So that probably is a good approach. And so you say, okay, well, I've never been a speaker before. How do I start that? It's just going out and start speaking. It's sort of like you're blogging, right? You just go out and do it, put yourself out there, talk for free, local business groups, and then put yourself in a position where people see you, they hear about you, somebody shares something about you, and they'll reach out to you and say, hey, could you speak at our event?
Okay, great. Now, I'm just getting into speaking, so
Yes.
I'm really curious to ask an established speaker like yourself, what is the main goal when you're speaking to people? Obviously to provide value to them, but where are you pointing them at the end of your talk?
Well, I'm pointing them back to me personally most of the times, right? So I do have some online training packages. We point them to them. We give out information. They can take a free trial, and then hopefully we can upsell them to a paid subscription after that. And for me, it's, my goal is how do I expand the number of services I have online that I can point people to, that I can get them engaged with me, something small to say, okay, this is sample Andy. Yeah, I like what Andy's saying more than just this talk, but I've sampled something else. And now I want to buy more.
So the main goal is to get them opted into your email list,
yes.
Right? What are you using for your email marketing automation?
So Infusionsoft.
Oh, cool. Me too. That's a big one.
Yeah,
I
I was using HubSpot. Loved HubSpot, but I think Infusionsoft a little more focused for what I want to do with the business I'm trying to do. So, it works fine for me.
Now, how many team members do you guys have?
We've got a virtual team of about 4 altogether.
See, because I'm right there with you. We usually have 3 full-time and some virtual, a few other part-times, no more than 5. And I really thought Infusionsoft was a big piece of software to bite on with that small of a team.
It is. And so, I have a consultant that works with me on that. And we're going to continue to evaluate as we go forward. Is that the right platform for us? Are there others, especially as we get into more online courseware? Does Infusionsoft provide the right answer for us? A lot of thought leaders use it. That's sort of why we're there.
Agreed.
But we're always sort of saying, okay, what's best? What can we use that is extremely effective, most effective for us in terms of selling content, supporting the customers, and also cost effective?
Yeah. Okay, well, wow, I'm going to have to ask you some more questions when we get offline here, but this is for the Shakers, and one actionable tip that they can execute on instantly. After listening to this episode. So, Andy, what is the one action item you recommend to our listeners?
Start creating content.
Start creating content. We've already gotten that one before. So let's get really specific. What type of content and why?
Well, the easiest thing that people should be doing if they're not is sharing. right? So if you're intimidated by the idea of actual creating fresh content, is what is it that you're interested in? What are you passionate about? Why are you in business as an entrepreneur? And the first step then is follow people that are writing or producing content that you're interested in and share it with your followers and start building up your following then. So people understand that when they're following you, they're going to get access to great content about something that you're mutually interested in.
Yeah, so that's a new one. Sharing, right? Like we've talked lots about you have to, record your first podcast, publish your first blog post.
Well, I think you should, but I mean, people are intimidated by this, right? Not everybody, but some people are intimidated.
It's really
What's
scary.
the first step? So the easiest way, and this is your opinion, right? This is the things you share reflect what you believe in or should. So by the same token, it's no different than I think to write something that you believe in, right?
Yeah.
That's an easy step to take at that point. Once you put yourself out there saying, look, I put a stake in the ground. These are things I believe in. These are what I think are important. These are things you should know. Writing a blog about it or producing live streaming a video about it or anything becomes pretty simple after that.
Yeah. There it is, Shakers. Share the content that you're publishing. Don't be afraid to put your opinion out there and defend it.
Yes, absolutely. And the thing is, most people are always worried about somebody telling them that they don't know what they're talking about. And we all have that fear. When I wrote my first book, I was mortified by the thought that someone may look at that and think, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But people, by and large, are very generous, and people assume that if you put that book out there, you're putting that content out there, that you've got some credibility.
And you do. If you're willing, if your confidence level allows you to share it versus someone who didn't have the confidence level to do that, chances are you might know a little bit more about it. But yes,
the balance is still weighted heavily in favor of the consumers versus the creators. So be a creator.
Yeah, and if you feel like vomiting, like I did before publishing my first book, I think that's normal. Like it's pretty scary.
It is scary, and I used to have the standard proof for, I guess I used to have with my wife when I first started public speaking, as she would tell me, how did it go? And I literally would come back and say, well, no one stood up and called me an idiot, so it must have been successful.
Mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished. And, if you use that as sort of a bar, in fact, if you use that as a bar, you're going to pass handily every time.
Yeah, that's great advice. All right, Shakers. Well, don't you forget to share aggressively the content you're putting out there, and don't be afraid to offend it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Seriously, there's a ton of free content out there. I'm learning there's hundreds of thousands of podcasts here at Podcast Movement.
There's
it's
250,000 podcasts out there.
Yeah.
The thing with everything, and as long as you brought that up, one last point is you're going to start creating content. You got to do it consistently. You got to make a commitment to yourself. There's not something I do once, not something I do once a month. Well, once a month, as long as you're doing once a month, that's consistent. But get on a schedule, stick to it, because if you build an audience, they're going to expect you to be there.
All right, Andy. So Andy's one of my mentors. Matt Holmes, promised to record 12 episodes today for the Handshaking podcast to publish once a month, or not, or we're not going to do it, and no one's ever going to hear this.
Right.
But
so do it.
Once a month. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do
All
it.
right. Perfect.
All right, Shakers. Thanks for tuning in. Andy, where can we find you online before we close down here?
Find me at andypaul.com. You can find my podcast, Accelerate, on iTunes, Stitcher, or at my website at andypaul.com. And if you want to contact me personally, reach out to me at andy@zerotimeselling.com.
There it is, Shakers. Andy, thanks for tuning
Matt,
in.
Thank you.
Shakers, peace, yo. Peace. See you later.
Peace.
Whoa, Shakers. There it is. Take action today and keep up with the hustle. Don't forget to check out handbrander.com. And on behalf of Matt and the entire Handshaking team, thank you for listening. I love you.